today my coaching is on closing. What happens at the closing table? How do you have a successful closing? What does that look like? So I'm just going to make sure I got my Facebook Live and going here. I have my chat open. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask me, please feel free to put it in the chat that comes on here. Hopefully everything is working out the way it's supposed to be. But we will get started here. I'm going to do this for about 15 minutes, rock out through this quick coaching for you and help those that are there. Either if you're an agent, a lender, somebody literally going through closing, what your expectations could be. So I'm going to walk you through what takes place on the closing day, the day after, and the day before, or the couple days beforehand. And so I got some notes here that I'm going to share with you. So feel free to ask me anything that comes in. So the closing day. All right. The closing day itself is you actually being like, you're on the stage. You should just be gliding through. It doesn't always happen that way. So just you yourself act like it's going to be smooth. So, but when there are some rough patches, be calm, be cool. Don't get intense. Don't get emotional. Just be like, we got this. So in the case a couple of days before closing, it's very, very important. A couple of key ingredients that you got to make sure of is the most important thing, and this is either for buyers or sellers, and that is to make sure that you have your utilities taken care of. So as a seller, you got them canceled. As a buyer, you got them in place. And this is so, so important for Friday closings because if you didn't tell your buyer to have the utilities transferred, and on Saturday, when the utilities are turned off, they will not be able to get them back on. Now, things are a little bit different because of technology, but for the most part, if you didn't tell them to get that stuff taken care of on Friday, they could have their utilities turned off over the weekend and they're taking cold showers. They're not going to be happy with you. So utilities are very, very important. So you want to make sure you technically should be sending that out at least a week, 2 weeks in advance, but follow up at least 3 days beforehand. So it gives them an opportunity to make sure they change out their utilities. All right. The next key things are pool fobs, mailbox keys. Also, I know this might sound silly, but garbage day. Like when is garbage day? Finding that out. So then that way they don't come to the property and their garbage cans are completely full from the previous seller who decided to empty out their garage, and the next thing you know, they're walking into complete full garbage cans. Sounds silly, but important to make sure that you know when garbage day is, when you think the seller might be taking their garbage, all that stuff. So make sure that they understand that, what that looks like. HOA information. It's always good to know any HOA stuff that you possibly have that you can get from them. When there might be another event, especially if they're moving in now. Like, are there any Christmas events? We don't want to miss out on anything that your buyer that's moving in. Primarily, check with the seller. Hey, is there Christmas with Santa? Are there any events that I could tell my client that they need to be a part of within the first couple of weeks that they're moving in there? Double check if it's the summertime, if any firework events, when the pool's opening, when it's closing, when the hours are, anything like that. Maybe websites, stuff like that, to be able to help those buyers in that. So those are some key things in reference to the buyers and the sellers, with the transition of going through. As a seller, make sure you leave everything on the counter. The saying is, it's just like everything that you garage. Oh, I forgot about garage door openers. Any pins, any key, like now things are keyless. Like, do you need a code to be able to get in to reset the code? How are the codes set? Like, do you have any information about that? Door, door bells, rings, whatever they're called now. There's always something going on, but making sure the Bluetooth, any Wi-Fi passwords, any security systems, anything like that, you want to make sure that you're touching base on, because those are some key ingredients. Because you don't want them calling you at 9 o'clock at night when the alarm's going off or something's taking place that you didn't get. So have a list, and if you have a transaction coordinator, double check, make sure that their list matches yours to say like, hey, I don't want anything to be messed up. Let's make sure we get everything. Next, we dive into the attorney aspect of it. So the attorney aspect of it, you want to make sure they have up to 24 hours, but you want to make sure you get the CD. If it's a cash deal, you want to make sure you get the HUD. So you want to have those things available for you, so that way you can review it, make any changes. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. You want to double check with the time. when are the sellers coming? When are the buyers coming? When are your clients going to be there? How is that going to be? What is that going to look like? If it's your first closing and you've been there a day, your first one literally as a new agent, I probably would recommend knowing how to get there. The worst thing is to show up late because you didn't know that it was in South Boulevard and all the buildings in some of those corners look the same and you get confused on which one it is and which elevator you're supposed to go on. Why do I say that? Because that happened to me. So I say that to help you that make sure you know what in the scenes look like, how to get in there. Hey, just want to let you know it's the fourth building on the left. They all buildings look the same, but it is the fourth one on the left. When you get there, you're going to see these beautiful glass walls. Just go inside that elevator and press 3. It's on the third floor. So that way they don't have to worry about it. That emotion's not there. I always say when you're driving, you go places and you're with a train of people, the most stressful job is the person leading the 4 cars in the back. The 3 cars behind you don't have to worry too much because they're like, all I got to do is follow the person in front of me. It's like their brain doesn't have to think compared to the first person who's leading. And it's like, all right, where do we got to go? Is the GPS on? Do we take a right? Do we take a left? Where am I supposed to be at? So kind of guide them through that because they've never been in those office buildings. So help yourself out with that. Wiring instructions. Wiring instructions are so important now. You got to make sure that whether you're the buyer or the seller, what are their forms? What do they need? How does that look? Do you need to do, how in advance do they need to be at? What is it? Can it be a cashier's check? You can't do personal checks. You got to have routing numbers and account numbers. Do they have any special wiring instructions? Do they have a form that you have to fill out? All these things you want to make sure ahead of time because you're going to have to tell your buyer, hey, you need to wire this much money. Okay. Number one, where do I wire it to? What is the account number? What do the wiring instructions look like? Make sure you have that information so you can give it to your client so they can do it. You want to try to get at least a day or 2 days beforehand of what that dollar amount is. Now, a little information for you is that if the wiring amount is off, you can do a personal check under a certain dollar amount. It's up to the attorney. And if there's an overage, well, the attorney can cut you a check, but you have to have at least 95% of the lump sum right there for you. So then that way, or for the attorney, so that way the majority of this, you're not having to worry about too much. The rest of it you can go through. So don't worry if it's off for a little bit, but you got to make sure that you got that information that's there. So next, when you go through the wiring instructions, I talked about the CD and the HUD. I'm a very big advocate. I want to see it. Like I need to see it before my clients go to closing. Why? Is because at some point during the closing, the attorney will say, I'm not too sure if you looked at this yet. Or did your agent send this to you yet? I want to be able for my client to say yes, and he reviewed it. Okay. It's a shining star, especially if there's another agent in the room. I'm just competitive and I'll just tell you how it is. But if you're the other client and the other agent's in the room and the attorney says it, I love when my client gets to say, yes, we reviewed it. And then they go to the other side and they say, oh no, this is the first time we've seen it. It's kind of like, yes, great job. So I just like to be fully prepared when it comes time for that stuff. I want my clients to be fully prepared so that way they're like, yeah, we have it. Stress is low. It's down. It's not something that they're like, got it, no problems. I've seen it, looked at it, got the numbers. The attorneys like it too. It's like, wow. And they'll talk you up too. They're like, wow, that's great that your agent did that for you. So make sure you go through it. Make sure there is no questions. Have your client review everything with it. That's why they do it in the test. That's why you do it now. So make sure you have that information so you understand all about that stuff when it comes time for it. So the next item I'm going to talk about here is going to be the final walkthrough. Okay, I'm going to get back to closing day, but we're going to get to we're going to get into the final walkthrough because the final walkthrough is very, very important. And a lot of people make this mistake. So if you're taking notes, listen closely. Do not do the final walkthrough. I know some of the experienced agents are going to be like, what? No, but I'm just telling you, do not do the final walkthrough literally an hour before closing. Why is that? Because if something is screwed up, if there's a problem, if there's a hole in the wall, if the carpet's got a stain, if something took place, that means you're giving yourself 1 hour to try to negotiate through it. Try to do the walkthrough 24 hours in advance. Because if there is a problem, you're giving yourself time to be able to fix it. You're giving yourself time to be able to negotiate through it, to have a conversation. It's not as stressful. A lot of people do it that morning of or an hour beforehand. No. And tell your clients, listen, I just want to let you know, because here's what most agents do. They don't give them a reason why they're doing something. Okay. I just want you to know, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, that it's very important that we go an hour or 24 hours beforehand, a day beforehand. So if something is not right or good, then that way it gives me time to negotiate for you to make sure we can fix it. Oh, yeah, that makes sense, Brock. Thank you for thinking of me. Okay. As a seller, I'm saying to them, listen, you need to get your stuff out the day beforehand. If you don't get it out a day beforehand, what happens is it becomes stressful. The buyer's coming in, you're trying to get things organized. If they see something they don't like, it just ends up being a stressful mess. And that's the last thing you want. So I always encourage my sellers to go in, get yourself closings Thursday. Let's get everything cleaned up, ready to go Wednesday. So that way we are good to go. I would also say to you by 3 o'clock on the day before, just get it all knocked out. Why? Well, because then that way, if they want to come that evening, you're not worried about it. It's all cleaned up. You might say, well, I got a couple things in the garage. That's fine. But I always say the day before, educate your sellers, educate your buyers on why you're doing it. And then they're going to be more apprehensive, or they're not going to be as apprehensive, and they're going to go along with it. Be like, that makes sense. A lot of times agents, we just don't explain our rhyme or our reasoning. I had a great conversation with the seller, a listing I picked up, and she's like, oh, Brock, you know what? I didn't see you put in there for a first time home buyer. Why didn't you do that? Well, let me just explain to you why I didn't do it. And it's because your price point is 300 plus, and that's a little bit above a first time home buyer. First time home buyers are a little bit more with that low 200s. This is a little bit more. More importantly, the reason why is because most of them are FHA, and 3.5% of a $300,000 home is over $10,000. Most people don't have over $10,000 as a first time home buyer. They're scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck. Well, then she says to me, oh, that makes so much more sense. Thank you for explaining that to me. Nobody has. And then it was a done deal. We just don't explain why we do things. And when we do explain it, we're educating them. And then they're like, oh, that makes more sense. Okay. So, final walkthrough why I do it. We know what we should be doing a couple days beforehand, making sure we have everything set up for the sellers and the buyers. Um, the next thing is when they get there, what their expectations are. So we always want to make sure that they're bringing their driver's license, some form of identification. I share it with them like, this is what's going to take place. You're going to need this. Okay. This is the stuff that they're going to ask for. I already have it planned for them. When I get there, I said, hey, do you have your driver's license? I grab it for them and I bring it over to the front desk. I'd say, have a seat. I just need your driver's license. I got to bring it up here so that way they have it. I'm giving it to the attorney or the paralegal, whoever's sitting at the front desk. They usually say, do you want water, soda, or anything else that you have? So I'm doing that. We've already talked about the money, so the money is not an issue. The buyers and sellers already know it's either their funds are being wired to them or they're wiring the funds, but it's all taken care of. It's done. I just need your driver's license. That's all they have. I do also say to them to bring, a routing number and account number in case they need it. Everything's done on their mobile app anymore. Sometimes I do say bring a check if they have a checkbook, just in case, especially on the buyer side. If there's a shortage, they're taken care of. They're not like, oh my gosh, I left the checkbook in the third drawer way at the bottom where their socks are. Like, nobody uses checkbooks as much anymore. So make sure that they have that information. So the other thing that you want to make sure, oh, thank you, Shelley. The other thing that I want you guys to make sure of when you're going through the closing is I like to prepare them. So right when we walk in, I'm telling them, hey, we're going to sit over here. This is what's going to take place. I don't know if the other agent's there. I don't know if the other clients are there, especially if it was a challenging situation. Guys, you got to prepare them that they could see them. Like, hey, guys, we got to put our feelings aside here. We got to get to the closing table. Sometimes you meet them, sometimes you don't. Most people are very cordial, but I like my clients to be like, in case they do see them, like, let's have that stress, like, oh, I want to say, oh shit moment. Now, and I can calm you down, and then we walk into it. So I just like to set the scene for them. I tell them exactly how it's going to be when we get into the conference table. Hey, you two are going to sit on one side. I'll sit on that same side. The attorney usually sits on one side of the head of the table. Sometimes the sellers or buyers are there. I don't know. Everything's kind of changed. Typically they don't, but sometimes they do. I don't know, but it's going to be no problems here. Here's what's going to take place. As a seller, you're going to sign 5 forms. As a buyer, they're going to be there for quite some time. Their packet's really thick. Don't worry about that with you. You have 5 forms: deed, mechanical lien, something to do with taxes. You're going to have to sign off on the CD. And I can't remember what the fifth one is, but at least I tell them, like, it's short and sweet. Here you go. Don't feel like you missed anything because they're still there and we're picking up and going. So I set those expectations ahead of time on what that looks like at the closing table. Question I usually get sometimes too is like closing gifts. Is there a dollar amount? What does it look like? Every closing is different. Every closing gift is different. We use the All About You form that allows us to be able to gather some information throughout the transaction for me to know like what they have, if they like kids, if they travel, if they're into camping, do they like barbecues, do they cook, whatever it is. We try to vision or mirror it towards what they like and what we think that they would do. Price wise, it always varies. It depends obviously on the purchase price of the home. Sometimes one of my clients, they have 2 little kids, so it was date night, and I said, I'll watch your kids, and you can go on a date on me, and they're going to 131 Main, I think. So those come into play. So closing is if you have a closing gift, it depends, people I'm like, literally, it's detailed and planned out, guys. Like, when do you give the closing gift? Sometimes I give it right in the beginning. If it's a big gift, sometimes I give it at the end or whatever it might be. The other key ingredient are keys. So keys are very important. Buyers and sellers, you have to understand the keys are mandated by the state of where you live on whether or not you could have them at closing or when they record. It all depends. I'm a very big person. As long as the money's there, I'm good to go. I don't, well, how do I want to say that? That's just what I do. It's just if the money's there, we're good to go. I let the sellers know, listen, the buyer's already got carpets cleaning, movers coming in, blah, 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 blah. As long as you have your money, do you really care when this thing records? Most of the time, they're like, no, I just want my money. Exactly. As a buyer, I just let the buyer agent know ahead of time. Buyer agent, I just want you to know it's very important that the money is there. If we are fully funded, then you will get the keys. If we are not fully funded, you won't get the keys. That way, it also pushes that buyer's agent to be, sometimes they're like, well, what do you mean fully funded? That means you need to get on the horn with your lender to make sure that their money is wired. And you got to make sure that your client has their money wired to the attorney. So that way, when we have an early morning close, they really should have the funds the day beforehand. That's just what I'm saying. And so until we're fully funded, we're not going to release the keys. It just triggers them to make sure that there aren't any hiccups. How many of you on here have been to a closing when the attorney walks in the room or the paralegal walks in the room, whispers to the attorney, and the attorney says, well, we haven't received the funds yet from the lender. Nothing against lenders, but we know that there's challenges. So you got to make sure that it's fully funded to make sure they have the money. Nobody really cares about anything else as a buyer and a seller. They just want to know all about the money. Seller wants to know when they can get their money, and the buyer says, I hope we have all the money because this was expensive. So you want to make sure that you have all that taken care of, so it's like not a problem. Because even if they say, well, the funds aren't there, it's not like, oh no, what's going to happen with the keys? Like, we already know you're not getting the keys until it's fully funded. As a seller, you're just like, well, my job's done. As a buyer, like, what the hell? We're let's get on the horn. Let's get it with our money. So sets the stage of everything's done ahead of time, so that way your clients aren't worrying about it. The next one is the follow up. The follow up after. So as a seller, we don't know, or as I always tell them, listen, I don't have access to your bank account. I don't know when it's going to land. I know that we're going to close between 3 and 5, and I'm hoping your money hits between 5 and 7. Let me know when it gets to your account. I'll tell you when it closes or when it records. I won't know when it hits your money. And once again, it goes back to the money, because when I talk to them and I say, hey, it recorded, guess what they say? That's great. When's my money coming in? So that's the most important thing, is understanding when the money's coming in, because that's all they care about. So make sure that you have that and you understand that, hey, when will the money hit? And the only the seller can tell you. Because then once that's done, it's like you confirmed everything. It's a really good opportunity at that point. So as a buyer, you just want to know if they're holding out the keys that you can pick up the keys or anything else. But let me talk about the important stuff. A lot of people miss this part. So when it comes time as an agent, you want to make sure that you're following up and you want these last 2 days, 3 days to be so very important. Because if I was to ask you, do you remember what your listing presentation was like? Do you remember what your buyer consultation was like? Do you remember the first time you talked to them? Most of the time, if you ask that question to your client and to yourself, you're going to say, no, not really. Even if something bad happened, then they don't really remember it. What they remember is the last thing that you've done with them. So why the closing is so important is because that's what they will remember. And when you want to ask them for a testimonial, when you want to ask them for a Google review, this is the best time to do it. But it's not going to be good if you screw up this part because they remember this part. They don't remember the beginning. They remember the end. So dot your I's, cross your T's. Even if you gave them a nice gift, it still doesn't make them feel the process. So it doesn't matter like, well, I got them a really good gift. They don't care. They care about how you made them feel and making them feel comfortable, less stressed. The best compliment I get is when they say to me, wow, that's it. That was easy. It's like ding 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 ding. Perfect. That's exactly what I was trying to get at. I wanted to make sure you got everything that you needed. So it's very important that you have everything lined up those last couple of days, the day before, the day after, the day of, and the day after. The day after is a check-in call. How you doing? How are things going? How's the move? Did you get your money? Did everything work out well? Where are you at? Every situation is different between a buyer and a seller. So typically in a buyer side, some of the closing gifts are some of the things you can do. Cleaning gifts, a cleaning company. Maybe the house wasn't as clean as they wanted it to be, or you just want to send them in a cleaning. Pizza, some sort of quick and easy food delivered to them with Uber Eats. Now it's very simple for them to be able to get that because they're doing a lot of different things, especially if they have families. Convenience is so important. So having the house clean, maybe after they get things settled, maybe ordering a detailed cleaning is some of our closing gifts. Doing Uber Eats, giving the kids food, landscaping, get their yard mowed, get them taken care of. So that way, whoever mows their yard, they're not having to worry about that. Oh my gosh, I've been moving. I haven't even taken a look at the yard. It looks like a hayfield. Get some landscaping out there. Have somebody come out there and mow it up. Don't worry about it. Your yard will be all mowed this week, so you don't have to worry about it. It's all cleaned up. If you want to continue using their services, let me know. So those are key things that we do to make sure that they're, if it applies to it. Sometimes it doesn't apply to it, that they don't need those services or they don't need anything. Sometimes it's just a simple closing gift, what they want. But I just want to give you guys some ideas, and then follow up with them. Make sure you have in our program here that we use. EXP has KV Core. So KV Core has one of the campaigns, after closing, you click on it, you put on it, and it gives you reminders as an agent. It gives them that your client, check in with them 30 days. How are things going? Do they need any vendors? Do they need anything? Do they have any issues? Maybe drop something off to them just to check in. So different things to follow up with them. So does anybody have any questions for me? Does anybody have anything? I know I went through a lot throughout the closing day because there is a lot. It's the most important. If anybody's got any questions for me, put it in the chat. I will answer them while I'm doing my closing remarks. But I appreciate those that are being on here. I think the closing is something that I did with my team that I Reggie had a closing, and the next thing I know, he's like, yeah, I'm done the closing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't really go over too much with you. So things do sneak up on you. So make sure that you have everything in order and button up. If you have any questions about the closing or want to know more about it, just send me some message in here, ping me, text me, email me. All my stuff's online, so you pretty much can find me all over the place, on Facebook specifically. But let me just double check to see if anybody has any questions or anything. I don't see anything. Good. Maybe I answered everything. Sometimes it's good when I don't have any questions because I checked all the boxes. So I kind of like to have notes down of what it is. So You bet, Reggie. Thank you. Um, so, guys, I want to wish you guys a very, very happy Thanksgiving. I appreciate you guys being on here. I do record these, so I'm not going to prolong them anymore. We put them on our Impact Worldwide group through our organization. So feel free that if you have any questions or want to review it, I'll have it back on my YouTube page. But you can also check us out on our Impact Worldwide, all our coaching. I'm very honored to be coached up with a lot of top agents in the country. And so wanted to share this with you. Thank you, Sherry. Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Shelly. Appreciate guys. You guys got something out of this. And if you have any questions for me, let me know. Enjoy your time, enjoy your family, and I'll see you guys next week. See ya.